As an actor and storyteller, I have always known and felt the importance of poetry as a medium. But I have to admit, it's always intimidated me. It seems like such a specialized and stylized art form. Should it rhyme? Should it not rhyme? What's the meter? Is it iambic pentameter or something like that? But as I dive deeper into the world of death positivity and embracing my mortality, I've become more and more open to this art form. For my 50th birthday, my Aunt Linda gave me a book of Japanese death poems written by Zen monks and haiku poets on the verge of death. It took my breath away. When viewed through this lens, poetry can take an entire lifetime and elegantly distill it into a few lines of verse, thus encapsulating all of the emotion, the tone, the color, making the personal universal. And I'm hungry for more. Our guest today, Laura Van Prooyen, is a poet who uses reading and writing poetry as a way to facilitate healing. She hosts restorative writing workshops and free resilience workshops for healthcare workers, including hospice workers, that blend poetry, community, and the science of resilience. Laura has over 25 years of experience teaching poetry and writing in a variety of academic settings, including here in San Antonio. She has also facilitated therapeutic writing sessions for soldiers with PTSD in an intensive outpatient program for 3 years at Brooke Army Medical Center here in San Antonio. I'm excited for you all to meet her. Welcome to Before You Go, the official podcast of Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. At Abode, our mission is that we live in a world where death is not feared, and we live fully until we die. And we'd like to make that happen before we go. I'm Natalie Buster at Abode in San Antonio, Texas. Welcome to Before You Go. Laura, hello.
Hey, hi Natalie, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
I have to say, you come very highly recommended for this podcast. We know a lot of the same people, and there's been a buzz about you in the Abode community here in San Antonio. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. No
I'll take it.
pressure. Yeah, no pressure for this interview, but I know a lot of people will be excited to listen to you and learn more about how poetry can help facilitate healing, especially when it comes to grief and loss and end of life. So, I was wondering if you could tell our viewers, or maybe people like me who are a little intimidated by the medium of poetry, what you do. Tell us a little bit more about your work and how this medium really helps you and the people that you serve.
Sure. I'll give you a little background first. I mean, my academic training's in poetry. However, how I really got interested in the work that led me to the work that I'm doing now was in, I think it was 2014, that I ended up at Brooke Army Medical Center. And I had been placed in this intensive outpatient clinic, and I really didn't know what to expect. I was a little more trained in classrooms. I was a high school teacher at the same time. And when I went into this room, and there was a table with eight kind of burly dudes looking at me with this expectation of, I guess the poetry lady had arrived. And I clearly saw that what I had in mind was going to be very different than whatever I needed to do in that room, because these were not people who really cared about poetry. They were in this clinic where they were hitting rock bottom, being acutely symptomatic with PTSD, and they didn't care about metaphor or anything else to do with that. So I realized I needed to connect immediately and have something like poetry is that. You don't have to be intimidated by it because it is also accessible, and there's different ways to choose poems that are accessible. However, in this setting, I realized right from the get-go, okay, I better find some different poems than I had in mind and talk about this differently than I ever had in a classroom before. And that evolved to the kind of work that I moved into with healthcare workers. Nothing in my life is quite linear. So it's kind of cyclical in the way things come and little seeds get planted and then things start to grow. But also, I just wanted to note yes, I am first and foremost a poet. And so writing, I know firsthand what that does for me. And while going to Brooke Army Medical Center was a job that I did, and then it evolved, I would say that I came to writing through grief in my own way. I'd been writing 20 something, many years. And it wasn't until I faced head on the grief of losing my brother that I really understood poetry is survival in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. That there's a poet named Gregory Orr who has a great book of essays called Poetry as Survival. But I found that I even tried to kind of turn my back on it because I was so deep in grief and numb, and found myself writing still. And how those poems, it's been 3.5 years now since I lost my brother. And somehow I wrote very intensely the month after I lost him. I was back and forth to Chicago on airplanes and I was writing wild grief anger things that later I revised and crafted into art that will be coming out in a chapbook form, which is just smaller than a full length book, this coming spring. So it's for me at this moment, it's like seeing the raw material move into um, published work.
Mhm.
That's not the trajectory for everyone or everything, but for me, it's affirming like, oh, right, all this other stuff that I practice, that I do, I believe in the process of grief healing firsthand when it really came to me.
That's fascinating. And you see the evolution of your grief that way too. I'm so sorry about the loss of your brother. And what a wonderful method of processing that grief that poetry
Mhm.
provided.
Yeah. Well, also, it's really interesting because the month after he died, I wrote a lot of really angry poems. And in part, it was because though he had cancer and had cancer for 10 months, somehow when he died, there wasn't, we were surprised.
Yeah.
And I say we, I don't know about me, but generally in our family,
Mhm.
he had been holding on to hope in different ways that I think there wasn't as much emotional honesty
Sure.
around the process that I see now. Sadly, you sometimes have to go through things to learn the lessons you never really wanted to learn in the first place.
Right.
But that has made a profound impact on me and how I see how I want to live and, eventually face my own mortality. I
Oh,
mean, more eventually, I hope.
right. Yeah. Like that's the spoiler alert, right? We're giving
Right.
away the ending of the story here is that we all will die. But what a wonderful realization that you have through this process of writing about your brother's death. And you could probably start to follow the stages of grief. And even though the stages of grief, as we know, are not linear, but you could see how it showed up for you in the
Mhm.
raw material. And then again, when you edit it and make it, package it up for public consumption, that was probably another experience that you had with that grief. And then
Yeah,
reading it again, maybe once it's published in the chapbook
right,
form.
right. I plan to be reading this publicly, and
Mm.
when that happens, people will say, "Oh my gosh, how can you read that?" And it's like,
Mhm.
well, because I processed that all 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And, but it's interesting. So one of the things that I do is that built from my experience at working at BAMC. I now facilitate writing workshops through an organization called Mission Belonging. And Mission Belonging is based in the DC area. They are veterans serving, but also healthcare workers serving, including hospice workers. I know that my Tuesday night group, who everyone who's listening to this podcast should sign up for and come to because it's free and it's virtual. And I think you'll probably add the link somewhere.
Yeah.
And so every single Tuesday night for the past 4.5 years, consistently, we have met on, and it's a 1 hour format, and I curate or select a poem that we read together. And by we, that's, I always say, come as you can, come as you are. So people, it's not the same group every week. It's
Mhm.
whoever can come as is convenient for them. And so it was a very interesting process because I think I've only missed a handful of these groups in the last 4.5 years. And that was when my brother died.
Mhm.
And then it was last year when I lost my mom. And then, an occasional something that has come up. And so I was doing this group, leading and facilitating this group while in very deep grief. And
Mhm.
of course, I had to check mine at the door to be able to come to this space. But everything we did in that space was informed by, and I will say, healing for me, thinking about I get to show up with these people who have self selected, entered in, unlike the IOP where they were required to,
Yeah. Yeah.
they were like literally, they had to be there. The people who come through the healthcare worker group, they self select. They are there because
Mhm.
they want to, because they are processing whatever they're processing through poetry with me. And I got
Mm.
to do that right alongside everyone. And as the group evolved, I felt more comfortable sharing too. Like, just want to give you all a heads up. Like, we buried my mom yesterday. And,
Mhm.
and so there's a lot of tenderness around that. But that group has become a lifeline for me too.
Yeah, it's about creating that sacred space in a lot of ways to make it trauma informed, grief informed, where you get what you need to process what you're going through, and you're also there to help facilitate the processing of others' grief and loss. I'm really curious about this first group that you worked with at BAMC. And for those of you who aren't in the San Antonio area, BAMC is Brooke Army Medical Center. And you have these burly guys looking at you. And I wonder if you could walk us through in detail, like what you did. How did you approach them? How did you melt that ice?
First of all, the people who were leading it were wonderful. The Army captain and the lead psychologist broke down the hierarchy. So everyone was on first name basis. So I really didn't know, it was because it's military, no
Mhm.
one knew anyone's rank. Maybe they did amongst themselves, but I sure didn't. And so, calling the Army captain by his first name, calling each person, the participants, me. I also just kind of because I was in charge of the space in there, I was like, okay, everyone's writing, you know, in-
Yeah.
including like the providers. I
Hmm.
just didn't. That's just how it rolls.
Hmm.
So when I walked in and saw them all there and introduced myself, I did have something in mind that day. We started with something called a 6 word memoir, 5 word memoir, but anyone, 6 words, anyone can write 6 words and not feel intimidated by that. So it didn't start with poetry per se, but the
Yes.
6 word memoir was my icebreaker of sorts. And then, we went around and I also told them there's no wrong way to do this. However you are feeling is legitimate how you're feeling, and whatever your responses are, there's no wrong way to respond to this, which is also the poetry that I bring into the Tuesday night group, the healthcare workers, because there is no wrong way to respond. So it's a different than an academic venture, which I do. I also teach at Trinity University, and so that's a different kind of inquiry. But in these spaces, it's what have you read? What do you see? Notice what you're noticing, what's resonating with you or not. Maybe you're resisting something here. And let's talk about that. And that's where we start from. And we might talk about poetry and craft in the conversation, but largely it's built upon that reader response. But because I was trained in the poetry and craft, I can guide where that goes.
That's the medium that you use. Yeah.
Right, because it's short, first of
Mhm.
all, because we have an hour, and it's chosen right. It's really accessible. It can be very accessible. You can
Mhm.
get something on one reading or two readings without having to parse it, you know, like an English class. So
Sure.
it's really, and then I create prompts based upon what we've read. I
Mhm.
have that all in advance. So then we write to something that's very open ended. People can choose what they want. So the basic, how this looks, how it looked at BAMC, how it looks in my group, how it looked in many of my classrooms is I'll usually start with a pre writing thought or question. Something as simple as, what did it take for you to arrive here today? You know, which could mean in the minute, or it could mean like you reflect over 30 years of your life. Oh my gosh, what did it take for me to arrive to this moment? We read a poem, we read it together, we discuss it, and then we'll write for another 10 to 15 minutes with a prompt, some more guidance from me. And then we always close out the hour with the option to share.
Mm.
Option on Tuesday nights, not much of an option at BAMC.
No, yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
you're like, "This is your order. You have to complete this
right.
order."
That's
Um,
correct. Yeah.
it's so in alignment with what we believe at Abode. It's in the name, the contemplative care for the dying, and we teach the art of contemplative living and contemplative dying. And I think this is exactly that. Like, this is describing our mission in such a way, in a very accessible way, being contemplative, being thoughtful, being in the moment. And we also discussed, we threw around the term trauma informed because we can pretty much assume that at some point everyone has been through some sort of trauma. So making it a very welcoming environment, very soft and gentle without a lot of criticism, like you said, can be really inviting for people who might be a little nervous to start this kind of work. And so for your Tuesday night group, kind of segueing into that, this is open for healthcare workers. Tell me a little bit more about that population.
Sure. It started with, so interestingly, the group Mission Belonging, when I started working with them, was called Community Building Artworks. They have now just rebranded because of this idea of belonging, because they were veterans based. They are veterans based, but they include healthcare workers because it came as a response to the pandemic and the moral injury and the people working in healthcare needing a space. And so this group was supposed to be I mean, it didn't really exist, but they first wanted to work with me in person, and then the pandemic hit. They started this group, everybody rebooted, and I've been doing it now 4.5 years. And where it stemmed from that, but then it's continued in terms of people realize that healthcare workers still need to be served in this way because there's so many obstacles and we need caregivers to have that caring, healing space. So, Mission Belonging, the organization that I work with, that I work through, their main focus right now is really like how all the work we do in these arts-based programs that are all contemplative in this
Mhm.
way, how they are combating isolation.
Mhm.
Because isolation, as you are aware, is this epidemic. It's destroying people's health, mental health, all of this. And so, how can we create community, which was in our previous name, but this mission belonging? Where
Mhm.
can we create these spaces where people really feel like they belong? And
Mhm.
I would say in the conversation around death and mortality, which are always ever present on a poet's mind.
Right. Yeah.
And, that I'm teaching courses with these themes right now at Trinity is where do we belong so that we can live our lives in such a way that we are engaged and intentional.
Mm.
And I feel like so many people come to these groups from a hurting space and then say, "Oh, I really do belong here. This is really great." And before long, it people just keep coming.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the truth is in the numbers, and the fact that
right.
people keep showing up and they feel that safety and support and that
Mhm.
sense of belonging.
And we have, I don't everyone doesn't always say what they do in healthcare or from the
Mhm.
get-go, but hospice workers, chaplains, people who are healthcare adjacent. So all of you at Abode, I would these are your people
Yeah.
where it really is that sense of people who are working in caregiving. I would say
Mhm.
that's probably even a broader umbrella and a more accurate sense of, who's coming to a Tuesday night group.
And so deserving of that safe space, that welcoming space. You know, I don't you wish that everyone took advantage of this? Like, what do you wish more people knew about the importance of having conversations and having these spaces where they can contemplate death, dying, grief, their mortality? What do you wish more people knew?
I wish that first of all, that more people weren't afraid of talking about it, that there was more emotional honesty around um, around death generally. That there's a podcast I listened to, and there was an interview with the physician Dr. Atul
Oh,
Gawande,
yes. He
who
wrote
made
Being Mortal. Yeah.
right, of course. And I heard him interviewed, and he said that he and his physicians had to reframe their question when they present treatment, not to like, here's your possible treatment, A, B, and C, because the patients would say, which do you choose? You're the
Right.
expert. But he said he learned from palliative care, the real question is, what does a good day look like?
Hmm.
And then you can choose your treatments based upon that. Like if a good day looks like eating your chocolate ice cream and instead you're choosing a treatment that's going to make you unable to eat, you know? So I wish that more people felt free to talk about death or mortality. I also wish that people would understand this kind of programming has value, um, because as soon as they come, they're like, wait, we want more.
Yeah.
Because the perennial issue is funding
Hmm.
and creating space, where as soon as someone has experienced something like this, they say, how do we maybe get this in the hospital? How do we get this in this kind of setting? How do we get this here? And the question always is, who holds the purse strings?
Right.
And how do you actually see this as value? And
Hmm.
it's like always seems to be after they've experienced something like it. So
Hmm.
I don't know.
They
That's
don't know that they need it until they need it.
right.
And I think, in my personal experience going through grief myself, like I didn't know how important it was to have these conversations until I needed to have the conversations.
Sure.
And I wonder if like the work that you're doing and really opening it up to the community with very few barriers, hey, it's on Zoom, it's free, it's invitational, you can pop in, you don't have to commit. Like having more programs like this where people can use the creative arts to help access those emotions and that relief, that sense of belonging,
Well, that's
showing it that way.
I work for them and with
Mhm.
them. That is really the brainchild of the CEO of Mission Belonging. Her name
Mhm.
is Seema Reza, and she actually met me because she came to BAMC and wanted to pitch the programming to the people I used to work with. And they said, we had a poet here who was doing that, and her name's Laura, and you should meet her. So amazingly, we met 1 month before, or a week actually, before the world shut down in the
Oh, wow.
pandemic.
Wow.
And because she wanted to talk to me about bringing it here locally. So the free, accessible programming, open to some, are open to all, some are healthcare specific, some are veteran
Mhm.
specific. I can't take credit for that. That is really the mission of the organization that I've been so lucky to be able to
Mm.
work with for all these years.
I'm so glad that you were talking about that because I think more people need to know about these types of organizations that really help people with the inevitable. And I think that's one thing I've learned in this work around death and dying is that this is inevitable and our response to it can be influenced by art or conversations or community. And it can make it more, oh, for lack of a better word, bearable.
Mhm.
To know that you're not alone, to know that you have a way to express yourself and the emotions that you're feeling. Like the
Yeah.
work, like the poetry that you wrote about your brother, having that access to something so powerful so that you can process your grief and loss.
I'm also optimistic though, because this semester I'm teaching two courses at Trinity. One of them, you see the seeds, how they go. Because I've done that work, this work comes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've done that work. So they got wind of some of the things I'm interested in. I was teaching there really just one class, an intro to poetry class, while um, one of their faculty members was abroad. And then word sort of traveled that I was interested in this. So they asked me to design a class that's geared toward its medical humanities, but it's really like for pre-med is one potential focus. So the name of this course is The Literary Imagination, Poetry as Medicine, How Reading and Writing Facilitates Healing. So right now I have 9 undergraduate women who again have self-selected to be in here. And I asked them, we've only known each other 3 class periods, and I asked them why they took it, and they read the course description, were so excited about it, and the conversations already. So these young women, age 18 to 22, are learning this now. And to back to your previous question, what do I wish?
Mm-hmm.
I wish, and I'm grateful for at the moment, that people are interested in having these conversations when they are 20, because
Yeah.
this kind of work can have a huge lifelong impact even before they might know how much they need it. And they're very interested in serving their future patients, their future, which means that these are those contemplatives.
Mm-hmm.
These are those people who will go into various professions making a difference with it. And I get to be a small part of that now through these courses in a traditional academic setting, and that Trinity wanted those there makes
Oh,
me feel very happy.
you're laying the foundation for doctors that I hope we all get to have as we grow older, people who
They're
have
so
that
young.
understanding. Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know if we
just
get to have them.
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, we'll
But
see.
wow, like you're investing in the future generation and helping to lay
Right.
that foundation of contemplative thinking and being. Imagine what their bedside manner will be with their patients and how they can really help those who are going through grief and loss with the work that they're doing now at 18 and 22. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Um, we talked a little bit about how poetry has helped you process the loss of your brother and your mother, and you've been able to study your own grief. And I'm also curious, how has it changed or, I don't know, helped you with your relationship with your mortality?
I think I fear it less. I think I probably didn't want to think about it so much. And now I think about it all the time. Um, because I suppose, the losing people who I loved and are very close to, and going through that, of course, for a while there was fear, and fear of losing more people who I love and I'm close to. But I have gotten organized. I'm like, I guess I realize that one of my reactions to grief is to kick in my high executive function. So
Yes.
it's like, get shit done.
Yep.
That's is kind of how.
Get the dance directives, the five wishes, all of that. Yeah.
Right, right, because I had to. When
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
when I lost my brother, I took his role of being in charge of my parents.
Hmm.
And my mother had dementia for about 10 years. And so there was a lot to be done. And I am in a different state than most of my family members. So it was a lot of flying, a lot of travel, a lot of having to be very organized because I had to um, take care of things. And then when my mom died, I knew what I was doing. I knew where the paperwork was. I knew where everything was. And her death was less stressful for that. And my dad is a very pragmatic person. He is still alive and very much like he already has his headstone there waiting for his death date. I mean, we used
Sure.
to go visit their headstone when my mom was still alive. I mean, there's somebody who thinks about death a lot. There's my father. um,
Yeah.
we go to the cemetery and we visit his brothers and all their people. So it's kind of an old world-ish experience where I grew up. So
Hmm.
all like, here's the Dutch cemetery and this is where all the Dutch people are. So um, I think that going through it, though, I've had to become a little, matter of fact. I don't feel like I'm wishing for
Hmm.
anything, but I feel like I'm really hoping to just live it fully and not be so afraid.
Oh, what a great answer. I think that's key, of just really being in the present moment, knowing that it's going to happen, not fearing it like maybe you once did or once how we all might have once feared it, and just being in the moment. I love that. I love that.
It's easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, of
Being in
course.
the
Yeah.
moment, right?
Well, and that's why it's a practice. And that's why I always believe that using contemplative arts and creative arts allow us to kind of keep coming back because it's hard. It's hard to just say, I'm going to be contemplative. What does that mean exactly? But I think art, and especially the poetry that you describe, can really help people be in that moment and really be present for what's happening and record it. That's it's a very visceral way of doing that I really enjoy about the creative arts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The
um
process over the product always,
yeah,
I think.
yeah, for sure. Well, how do you keep your cup full when you do all this work? You're holding this space for others. You're creating wonderful curricula and beautiful atmospheres for people to process their grief and loss. How do you keep your cup full?
Um, Lately, it's been very bodily. It's uh, working out. I like to lift
Mhm.
weight.
Mhm.
And I'm about to get back to roller skating. So,
Oh,
I feel like you can live in the cerebral only so long before really have to remember, oh, right, I live in a body. It's time to do something.
and that sounds so joyful. Like I always talk with our doula students, like, what is your definition of joy? And that's something that we can ask people that we serve too. And to me, roller skating sounds so joyful.
Yeah, it pretty much is. I had to take a break for, some boring reasons. But I just said to a friend, it is time to go back to the roller rink. Let's do it. So I better go dust off my skates.
It's like such a Gen X thing too. Like I love it. Like let's go to the roller drome, put on some tunes, some neon wear, and have at it. Sounds really
Yes.
good. If people want to find out more about you or these wonderful workshops that you provide, what's the best way for them to learn?
I have an author's website, which is just my name, Laura Van Prooyen, and you can find the spelling of it on something you have there, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll
You
put it
know,
up on the screen.
lauravanprooyen.com. That's
Mhm.
where you can find out about my poetry work. I do have links there to the workshops, but missionbelonging.org. And the workshop name is Poetic Record Resilience Workshop for Healthcare Workers. You have to register for those through Eventbrite, but they are free. So just register and then you get email reminders. So I would love to have some new faces coming to that.
Yeah, and people all over the country can join this, right? It doesn't have to just be San Antonio because, like you
Now,
said, it's on Zoom.
globally,
Mhm.
amazingly, I had someone in England and then someone in Australia. I'm like, it's the middle of the night there, but okay. Well,
But it's
because
important
sometimes,
to them. Yeah.
sure, or people are working the night shift
Right.
and showing up. So it is
Mhm.
really come as you can, come as you are. Sometimes there's a few people who I have never seen their faces and never heard their voice. They keep
But
their
they're there.
screen off, but they're there. They'll participate in the chat. So, it's not a weird lurker. And,
Yeah.
that's a thing that because people are signing in sometimes from their break room, we don't know.
They have to keep it quiet, but oh,
Mhm.
how wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Laura, what is one thing that you want to do before you go?
I thought about that question as you said it, and it sounds sort of general, but the truth is, I just want to keep expanding. That, sometimes life gets to you and you feel like your life shrinks, and your life shrinks from all the duties you have to do or this or that. And then when I feel the best is when I'm learning something new, I'm doing something. Um, I have friends all on the continuum of ages, and I learn so much from my friends who are older than I am about just keeping engaged in an expansive view.
Hmm.
And I think that's it. I just want to keep living, while I'm living, keep living. That's
Oh, I'm going to put that on a t-shirt. I think that is such a great motto to have for life. While I'm living, keep on living. That's
yeah.
good.
Well, Annie Dillard has that quote that I live by, honestly. The way we live our days is the way we live our lives.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's it. The
Mhm.
the way that we live our days, they add up.
Yeah.
The incremental business of living, um, just keep it expansive.
Mhm. Mm. Thank you, Laura. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate
Thank
the time
you.
you spent with us today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Mhm. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Before You Go, the official podcast of Abode Contemplative Care for the Dying. At Abode, we believe death is not a medical event, and we are not medical professionals. We're just sharing our opinions, and these opinions shouldn't be taken as medical advice. You can find us online on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. This episode was edited by Make Your Day Richer.